I am unashamed. What about you?
I just, no wonder I couldn't find John in the last 2 chapters last night.
Book of John's roaming around in your Bible.
I mean, it's really pathetic. I wish we could find you a new one, but I think that ship has sailed. We've had so many people out there in the Unashamed Nation trying to find y'all a Bible, but you're so persnickety about the exact. I mean, it's got, you talk about down to one printing of what y'all have there.
I got issues, buddy, but it's good. Know the author. The author doesn't wear out.
Well, that is true. You can't. That's why you got to just memorize it like Dad does. Yeah. So, Dad, you have. You were saying before we came on, started recording. You have quite the cadre that works on your property down there. So, tell the audience the little group you had down there and what they do.
Well, it's an area where it's a plethora of.
Let me get you fixed.
A plethora of various animals, lots of deer, plenty of squirrels, ducks.
Are they working for you too?
Turkeys. Yeah, well, all these are brothers. Stone is basically Willie made him the project manager or whatever. Yeah. And
what project is this?
The project would be what you feed for deer to graze on.
Oh, okay. All right.
Your deer stands, get those located.
I wasn't sure where you were going. You were kind of giving a Lion King type analogy where the forest with the workers are working in cahoots with the animals.
They're draining water.
It's almost like we're back to the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, they're planting various areas. Some areas the Almighty does quite a bit of planting for us. He a place, a lot of grass and stuff. So they look, but every couple of 3 years you have to bush hog those areas and let them grow back. A lot of the undesirables hopefully will not make it. The desirables.
So
you got smartweed, nutsedge, wild millet.
So y'all had a DED, right?
Yep.
So tell us about that. Yesterday.
Well, they came up with a contraption. Willie did and sent it down here. He said, "This is for y'all. Those trails that we cut to get through the woods. They're like 2-3 mile trails. So those trails, when you first cut them and you get down through there, when you start the next year, the limbs start filling it in and start taking it over. And if you don't thin them out or do something, it'll be just you're back to the thicket it was in when you started.
You're back on your hands and knees.
So Willie sent a contraption, and I looked at it, and I said, well, they said, we'll go down these levees, and we'll cut the top of those levees to widen them just a little bit so the limbs are not popping you upside the head when you drive down through there or have goggles on.
It just happened many times.
Eye injuries, many eye injuries.
So who is, that sounds simple enough.
The man appointed to do the job is the nurse practitioner.
So you had a nurse practitioner. Let's get the other people involved here.
The sequence of events.
The project manager.
I'm sitting there, and he walks over and he said, listen, he said, we ran a check on your blood. I got whatever they call too much blood. I don't believe it, but the doctor said, yeah, you're too much. So I said, well, how much is enough? I mean, how much too much do I have? Well, you want to stay about they named some medical term, 45. So the last time I checked it, it's about 52. I said, 45 to 52.
Pretty close.
I said, what would a pint do? And they said, well, a pint, you'd be down to 49, 52, 51, 50, 49. They said, move toward that 48, and you're all right. Okay. So I told the nurse man that, and he said, all right, I'll check it. He checked it. He said, okay, 52. He said, I'll take a pint Monday, and then I'll go over
So
and
your tractor driver is also your blood.
He's the tractor man that's fixing to get on the tractor after he drains me. I look around, hey, you know.
He changes the oil in the tractor and he changes the blood in.
That's correct.
You.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, that's multitasking.
I'm liking the cadre so
So he
far.
drains
That's
the
good. That's
blood, then he takes off down there, and I almost lost the man that drains my blood because he got too close to the edge of the levee. A levee is built on angles like that up that. Well, he got along on top. I said, be careful when you're on that thing. I said, because it'll slip off. And
So you gave him a prophecy that he didn't adhere to.
I warned him, be very careful, pay close attention when you're going down to the top of them levees because that thing will slide off in there. Well, he got out there, you know, and it wasn't paying attention close enough. And the tractor and the cutting device, it starts to slide down the levee, and he ended up in mud about, knee deep.
So he rode it down or he jumped off?
He rode it down. He had that bush hog on the back of it, and he kind of put that down when it was going to flip. So the thing almost turned over, but, you know, he's on the tractor. You don't want it to turn over because you're
So did they get it out?
It took, they called in the redneck.
So now we got
Jersey Joe.
Hold on, we got the plant manager, the nurse practitioner. Now you called in the local redneck.
You got the redneck, and you got the computer whiz, the Italian, that knows all things about computers.
So, why would you call a computer whiz
what
to the
role
bank?
did he
Because
play?
he's speaking to various companies worldwide at his house. He's at. So that's what he does. He cooks great Italian food.
Phil, wait a minute.
He was the one that he looked at his woman in downtown New Jersey, and he looked at his woman. He said, "Honey, look." About a year or two ago, he said, "You know what? Let's get out of here. We got to go."
I know who he is. I'm saying, what could he bring to the table with a tractor stuck in the ditch?
Because he takes that
Might get
computer
hungry.
and he looks at whatever piece of equipment you're having trouble with, either to get it going, to unstick it. I mean, he's just a
So he's a professional problem
mind.
solver.
Great mind.
From the computer angle.
Yep. Yep. So they all get out
What's
there.
funny to me is you called the local redneck, which I know very well, who's the most, what is the correct
He's
English?
on call.
He's the furthest thing from what you're saying the New Jersey tech guy is. Why would you call the two extreme?
If
he's good with chains.
It begins to mesh together when you have someone that is very computer savvy, looking at either cars tangle up, how we're going to get this right. It's like the show on the Weather Channel where these big trucks go off in the ditch and they start hooking up, I mean, heavy stuff. Moving tonnage up them road beds. It's the same, that's what we were into right there. It had gotten down off the road bed and was down in the thicket in the mud. And I mean...
Well, I learned something. I thought the Weather Channel just talked about the weather. They actually have TV shows?
Well, they blame it on weather, but if you're cutting the top of a levee, even in Louisiana, and your tractor slides off that top, you've got the Weather Channel boys. You know what they call it? They got a name for it. It's been on television for a while. What happens from people who get off in the ditch.
I'm not watching enough Weather Channel.
But anyway, you get like a redneck, a computer buff, a nurse practitioner. You're there. You got the project manager, Stone. He's going around dictating
that
policy.
was the team.
That was the team. And they're giving me the information. How far are you? You know, they said, here's where we are right now. You know, they're telling me what they're doing because I'm the one eventually. If something is torn up, I'm going to have to pay for it. If they tear something up, if one of them gets killed.
You're the money man. You're the money man.
One of them gets killed in case if it had rolled on him.
This is the next show right here.
Well,
we got the money man, the nurse practitioner, the redneck,
Somebody
the
gets
New
hurt.
Jersey tech guy, and the manager.
Who can
it's
cook?
It's a cadre of all brothers. We don't even ask them to come down there unless they're converted to Jesus, because we just had there. We'll be listening.
So this is like the PG version of Yellowstone down
Pretty
here.
well.
Yeah.
What we call it,
Yeah.
Washita.
I mean, nobody's getting hostile or cursing anybody or
That's why I said the PG version of it. I mean, you wouldn't have a train station. You would more have just a ditch. Take them down to the ditch.
Yeah. So they got it up on higher
where you
ground.
had baptized them rather than. Yeah. Okay. All right. I was trying to make that work. Phil, that's quite the story. So that happened yesterday, huh?
I never left my house. They would just give me updates. Updates.
All right, well, that makes it even more. It is 104 here, so
way too hot to even hardly do anything out there. It's hot, 100 degrees every day.
Yeah. So the happy ending is that nobody lost their life.
No one was hurt, and no equipment torn up, and it was quite the offer. I didn't go down there and look at it. They were just briefing me.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make a suggestion, and maybe I need to talk to the project manager, but I think the nurse practitioner probably should not be in the dangerous role because he should be available if anybody is injured. See that the whole thing would have broken down.
He's not expendable. We don't want him to pass on.
No,
you need to get him off the track.
Jimmy Red, he's expendable. Get him on the front line. Dan, we got Dan out there. He's expendable. Young. Yeah.
Well, you're so compassionate, Phil.
I'm so glad I'm not a part of this.
What happened to the godly principle that everyone matters, Phil?
Hey.
Well, hey.
Matter.
All right, well, I had an epiphany on the way down here.
Oh, my goodness. That was funny.
Yeah, that was. I don't know what. That was, Phil, just a day in the life. And I do think that would actually work on television.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It could be called In the Woods with Phil.
But I don't want. I don't have the time.
You've ridden off into the sunset.
Yeah.
No, Phil, you don't have the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did have an epiphany. I guess maybe after the smoke off my head from having bowls here. You know what's funny is that none of us are Bible scholars. So save the ink on the emails. I don't know. Do we still get emails, comments from the viewers? I'm looking over here at these two guys. They're both on a phone. So maybe that's what they're doing is checking the email. So we're not scholars. I guess our audience figured that out a long time ago.
They know that. Yeah,
but we do study a lot. So the smoke, was kind of going off my head because Hebrews can be what is the word? What is the word I'm looking for, Al? I wanted to say deep.
It can be one of these books where you kind of scratch your head from time to time.
Yeah, that's good. It can be a head scratcher. Perfect. Because I think
you think about it, you're taking about 3,500 years.
That is correct.
Jewish history, and you're funneling that all into one treatise,
trying to make sense of it all.
Comparison. Right. So the Hebrew writer took on a noble task.
So what happened? Our last two podcasts, I thought, man, this is just getting too complex. I felt like it's like a sputtering engine where you can't figure out exactly the complexity of what the problem is.
Oh, it is complex.
So the simplicity of it all, is that I keep going back to Jesus is better. Jesus is better.
Yep.
So I had an epiphany on the way down here. I had a T-shirt idea. I always think if you can say something that warrants a bumper sticker, if you can see it on a bumper sticker driving down the road, but it makes you stop and have this Selah moment to make a reference to the book of Psalms where he would come up with something so good that you had to have a moment of meditation. It was called Selah.
Which is what the word
S-E-L-A-H.
L-A-H.
Yeah, Selah. It's a stop and reflect moment. So I have one of those today.
Okay.
All right,
you ready? Are you ready?
Hang on,
you can do yours first. Just remember, going back to when we started this conversation, Jase always remember this. How old are you? 50 what?
I'm really not sure off the top of my head. I think I'm 50.
He's 52.
I'm 52.
You'll be 52.
I'm going to give you some good sound advice. Going into your 50s, just remember, try your best to stay away from film crews.
All right.
And your life will be a lot better on planet Earth.
Hang on. We got to take a break. But by the way, for the record, Jase will be 53 in August. So just so you know, let's take a break. We're talking a lot about proclaiming, because we're proclaimers of the gospel, and all of us teach and preach as well. But one of the things, sometimes you can do as a proclaimer is just what you wear. It proclaims to people. And our Unashamed merch does just that. And it proclaims that you're part of Unashamed Nation. In fact, I was noticing, I went to look at all the merchandise, and there are some Unashamed Nation shirts. And so it's a great thing, because somebody's like, what is an Unashamed Nation? It gives you an opportunity to tell them about the podcast. So we'd like for you to be Unashamed proclaimers. And the way you can do that, if you want to check out our merch, is go to unashamedmerch, merch.com. Use the code Unashamed10, and you're going to get 10% off whatever you buy. If you're a Blaze TV subscriber, you're going to get 20% off your purchases by using the code BlazeSub. So that's another good reason to be a subscriber and get our overtime stuff as well. So check it out, unashamedmerch.com.
Yeah. Send me a bumper sticker for my birthday. Okay, Phil, I do like that bit of advice. Stay away from film. See, that's what you just did is an illustration of what I'm saying. You put a philosophy in life on a bumper sticker. Stay away from film crews.
That's it.
See, if you put that on a bumper sticker, I would say, If I saw that driving down the road, I'd be like,
yep.
That's funny.
Yep.
These two guys who are part of the film crew right now
so
look like somebody
get a little
just,
deeper. If
just
you want to,
stole their lunch.
If you want to be have more peace of mind, stay away from the film crew.
You can put that in small letter.
Yeah.
But peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
Now it's getting too long for a bumper sticker, though.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay, so you ready for mine? This is a summation of Hebrews. We're having a bumper sticker moment. I'm trying to build the drama here.
Yeah.
So this hit me on the way down here. So you could categorize this two different ways. You could put why Jesus, why Jesus is better, Jesus dash, or you could just have the phrase. You ready? This is what hit me. No skeletons. How good is that?
I like it.
No skeletons.
I like it.
You say, why is that a bumper sticker? So, because there's two things I want to pursue. This came off the top of my head. So this wasn't like I read this. You know what? Let me look. No Jesus, no skeletons. I'm gonna see if anybody's thought of this before I go too far into this.
You may be, if you're on that vein, you may be voicing what I was fixing to say. Where I had my epiphany.
Hold on now. So I got two things about this though. Because when you think why Jesus is better, Al, this is also be a great sermon. All right, okay. No skeletons. I got two. So there's two characteristics of Jesus that makes him better than any prophet or religious leader or
everybody else leaves a trail of bones.
Well, so one's obvious. You're immediately going to that one about there's no skeleton. Jesus doesn't have a skeleton in his grave.
That's
right. But I was going for another one. So that's maybe the claim of Jesus. Because think about what we're pursuing here. If you look at the claims of Jesus, just real quick, give me a few off the top of your head, a few claims of Jesus.
I'll make you perfect through my death. Your faith and my death will make you perfect, sinless. No sins being counted against you.
Well, I'm gonna go down to that. What'd you say, Al?
He's the Son of God.
Well, he's the Son of God.
God.
Yeah, I am God. Right. There's a God I'm looking at. So
you're justified
in essence,
through him.
You wouldn't have to worry about a skeleton in a grave if you're an eternal being, right? So,
Right.
I mean, he made a lot of claims. You know, before Abraham was, I am. That means you don't have a skeleton in the grave.
Yep.
So, I mean, when you make a statement. But he also, which Phil got my other skeleton I thought about, because we use a phrase that we say, you know, people have skeletons in the closet. And usually that means you got some kind of baggage to your character. Even though they make reference to a skeleton, they're actually talking about a character issue. So so that was my point. Jesus doesn't have a character issue in the closet. He has no skeleton.
That's right.
In the closet. So it's one, okay, he's made these claims, but also the character of Jesus is what separates him. That's what hit me about that. So he doesn't have a skeleton in the grave, and he doesn't have a skeleton in the closet. So it's the character combined with the claim. Then I got on the C, I was thinking of C's, because he conquered, you know, the cross and he conquered the grave.
That is why.
So
what I was going to elaborate on, I won't right now. I will wait for it. But
we can wait.
What
for
I was saying is, his blood is the only way, because his blood wipes clean your sins, and no one else's or no other animal or whatever. The blood wasn't worth enough. That's why God chose his son to become flesh, because his blood is the only blood powerful enough to leave you no skeletons in the closet. You see what I'm saying? All other blood, you say atonement. Nope, not animals can't do it. You'll say justification through his blood. It's all these things that we're given through the blood of Jesus. No one else's blood is big enough. No other thing in the cosmos is big enough, important enough, rare enough. Just his. He said, I tell you what, you said, well, how do you view sin, God? He says, look at the sacrifice for it, and that ought to tell you, stay away from it. So he had to, within himself, he said, I'm going to have to show them how critical and how devastating sin is, because I'm going to show them what it takes to remove it. So, and man, what a way to remove it. But that's the only way out. That's how seriously God takes sin.
Well, that's why when
the black velvet.
Yeah. So that's why when he said in Hebrews, he had no sin. Where was that? It was without sin. So that's 4:15. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. There's no skeletons in the closet.
That is it.
I read that before, that John 8, when he was talking to the Jews, and they were, he was calling them, your father's the devil, and I mean, because they were claiming Abraham as their father, and he was like, yeah, your father's the evil one. But he had a sentence in there at the end where he said, can any of you prove me guilty of sin? He basically was asking, do I have any skeletons in the closet? The answer is no. That's John 8:46. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I'm telling the truth, why don't you believe me? So, look, while Phil was talking there, so I looked up no skeletons, which I don't know how the T-shirt should read. Should it just say no skeleton? Jesus. No
I think
skeletons.
It should say,
and it starts the conversation.
Right.
I just made up those two things off my head about no skeletons in the closet and no skeleton in the grave.
And the cost of removing those skeletons, the cost of sin is extremely high. The cost that you have to pay. Mm-hmm. It's extremely high. Well, the blood of God himself. Here's a created here's the created beings running around and a lot of blood in them. Animals, dogs, this and that and other, calves, bulls, goats. There's blood in them. There's life in them. The life's in the blood. When it comes to sin, you say, no, none of that was worth enough. Only when God said, I'm the creator of the cosmos, and I'm going to die for their sins.
Yeah.
That's a
You make an interesting point now that I've brought this up at an epiphany here. Maybe it's the Holy Spirit.
I mean, the Creator himself says, I'm going to have to shed blood for them because that's the only thing that removes their sin. I'm just saying the cost of sin was phenomenally huge.
Well, it was himself.
Yeah.
I mean, but you make a good point.
Hang on, Jase. Let's take a break.
You make a good point because it says there in 10:1, the law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the real themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship.
That is correct.
If it could, they would not have stopped being offered, for the worshipers would have been cleansed once for all and would no longer felt guilty for their sins.
Correct.
But those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins because it's impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Christ came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offerings you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me.
Look,
thus the reference to the skeleton.
You can bleed. Now, I'm going to fix it so you can bleed.
So I guess what I just thought is, so when they made these sacrifices, what did they do with the bodies of the
burned them.
Bulls?
They burned them outside.
So they burned, and so I guess what was left was skeletons.
Yeah.
Carcasses.
Yeah.
Bones.
Yeah.
Yep, carcasses. There was a whole valley full of them.
Really? Well, that's right, because when it gets to Hebrews 13, it says the bodies were burned outside the camp. Oh, that's going to be really good when we get there, because it says, but Jesus suffered outside the camp to make the people holy. That's one of my favorite verses. Let us then go to him. I think that's Hebrews 13:11 through 13. Let's get a preview of that. The high priest, this is Hebrews 13:11, carries the blood of animals into the most holy place as a sin offering, but the bodies are burned outside the camp. And so Jesus also suffered outside the city gate to make the people holy through his own blood. Let us then go to him outside the camp, outside the skeleton camp, right?
Right.
Burned outside the camp. And so Jesus also suffered outside the city. All right. Let us then go to him outside the camp, bearing the disgrace he bore. For here that we did not have an enduring city, but we're looking for the city that is to come. So this is fascinating. Now I'm thinking of that Ezekiel, the valley of dry bones.
Yeah, I was just going there.
Well, before you go there, so look, I think what we've decided is, because this T-shirt company that I have I make no money from, but I hope they sell 1 million of them. They come up with
316 tees.
sayings that we say, and they put them on a shirt, but they're actually coming from the Bible. So I think we're on to a new idea. No skeletons.
No skeletons.
Because I think it's too long to put in the closet or in the grave.
But
that may be the conversation.
You read all these texts by making peace through his blood shed on the cross, and you just start reading those kind of texts, and they go on. I've got a list of them here as long as you're on.
Before you read them, and we may save that for podcast too, because now my brain is like, this is, you know what this reminds me of is like when when a group of songwriters get together and they come up with a song, but we're like, this is a session for a sermon. I really believe that. Yeah. Because look, here's what's interesting. I wanted to see, I Googled, can I say Google? I went to the internet to see if this idea somebody had come up with this. and I was fascinated at what I haven't found. But two things that I did find, I put no skeletons just to see what would come up. Well, the first thing was, it's like skeletons, and it said no skeletons in China because they're superstitious. And there was a big article about that they deem that superstitious in China, which I have no reason for bringing that up other than just to show you the lack of ideas about this. But an article came up that the second thing was 5 creatures that have no bones. So I thought this was interesting. And I brought one of these up before years ago on one of these podcasts. So the first thing was a slug. And there's a picture of this slug that looks like something you would see in an aquarium, like a little creature. Because I'm pretty sure that a spoonbill catfish doesn't have a skeleton, but it didn't make the list. But I don't think it has bones.
No.
It has all
cartilage.
Cartilage.
Yeah, cartilage. And you would think they'd be good to eat, a boneless fish, but you tell me.
I tried it once.
Yeah, my buddy from Missouri... Look, actually smoked one, cut me a piece off of it, and sent it in the mail to me.
Whoo!
And when I opened the bag, it made me gag. Did that rhyme? Yeah. It's always a bad sign when you open the bag and it makes you gag. Speaking of bumper stickers. So
stay away from the spoon.
I tried it and immediately turned my head and hacked it up what was left. It was terrible. All right, a glass octopus. This is the list here. So that's number 2. 3 is a mantis shrimp. 4 is, I guess it's called a pink sea. It's some type of, doesn't look like a fish. It looks like a seashell floating in the ocean. But look, you know what number 5 was? The immortal jellyfish. I didn't say it says immortal jellyfish. That's what they named it. And why did they name it that?
I guess they think they live forever.
Well, they live for hundreds of years, what it says. But they do die.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
So why would they call it the immortal jellyfish? Because
they love to use those terms.
Because it didn't have a skeleton and it lives a long time.
Yep. No sign of it when it dies either, see.
But see, even science tries to wrap their head around naming something that doesn't have a skeleton that lives a long time.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, why not Jesus? He conquered the grave. There's no corpse with Jesus.
That's true.
And look,
well,
he's the firstborn from among the dead. Firstborn from among the dead.
What does that mean?
You got people die and they stay dead.
Yeah.
Till he came along.
There's no skeleton in the grave. This is working for me. But don't underestimate the character. The character, because people ask me all the time, like from a non-believing standpoint, they're like, well, how do I convince me that Jesus is the Son of God? Prove it to me. I mean, I've done Q&As, and you can tell where that question is coming from. And so some of these things we're talking about here, I talk about that. Well, because his body's not in a grave. And they're like, yeah, but prove that to me, convince. And so what I always get to, what I would say, the number one reason or the number one way I would recommend for people who don't have a relationship with God to get to know Jesus would be to study the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and get to know the character of Jesus. Because to me, that is the number one way, I think, to learn and to embrace. Because the character, I mean, we're going to the resurrection, but I had 2 points. There's no skeletons in his closet, which means his character is fascinating.
Yep.
The subtleties of Jesus' character. Because you think about what do most religious leaders or most leaders do? They tend to attack their enemies. Jesus didn't do that. He forgave them.
Yep.
Or they tend to have groups of people that they surround themselves.
Hating your enemies is fine with them.
But Jesus was open to everybody. He's the most non-racist,
non-threatening.
Every person, like the Samaritans, in this day and age, are considered to be just people that you didn't associate with. But he not only did he associate with them, he befriended them. And the tax collectors were the most hated, as far as vocation back then, group of people. And I'm sure they were. You just didn't want to invite them over for supper. And what did he do? And then when you think about the people who, from a moral standpoint, I mean, we're talking about prostitutes and, women caught in adultery and people who had been married 7 times and, all the character issues there. Well, what did he do? He befriended them and took up for them.
It's a good point, bringing in character. Hang on, let's take another break.
So
You're
that's
right, because and it relates to our character based on his character.
Well, that's what I was saying. That from Hebrews, when you read that verse that says he was without sin, well, that's a character issue. I mean, he also brings up this issue about his body, his physical body being the sacrifice, which is where we're at chapter 2, as opposed to these skeletons of animals, which were not going to be able to take away your sin as far as cleansing your conscience. But he seems to be, he's deeper than just the actual physical sacrifice. It's like his character and his power combined.
Yeah.
Well, here's how nothing saves the world. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Remember, I said how nothing saves the world. You should be like Jesus, Philippians 2:5, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. He's going to have to be big enough to remove the sins of the world. He made himself nothing. You say, how does nothing save me? He took the very nature of a servant. He looked like a man because he was a man. He was God who became flesh, being made in human likeness. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. That's why I said the cost. He's explaining the cost of your salvation and your peace of mind and you're having your...
No, I think you're right, Phil. I think what we should have done in chapter 9, talking about cost, when it made me realize this, when in verse 15 of chapter 9, when it says, for this reason Christ is the mediator of a new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised and eternal inheritance. Now that he has died as a ransom to set them free from the sins committed under the first covenant. Well, I looked up that word, because back then it didn't mean, it did, but it didn't essentially, the first place we go to is like a kidnapping of sort. But back then, it was always like these two nations would go at war against each other. Well, if you lost and survived, you went into basically a prison camp. You were a slave. That was part of losing. You either died as a soldier or you were conquered, which means you went to some kind of slave camp where you worked for the winning army.
Still happens to this day.
So my point is, though, ransom, in that case, the only way you could be freed is if somebody from your nation paid an extreme amount of money to set you, or somebody, it doesn't matter where they're from, but if they paid for your freedom, well, it was so high that very few people would have that. So what I'm saying is, when you read that, it makes a little more sense when you think about us being prisoners of sin and under the control of the evil one, whatever verses you want to go through, where here comes Jesus as an innocent sacrifice, paying to free you from your captivity, which is in sin. I mean, that is the cost. That is what he's getting at in the picture he's painting in your head. Do you agree?
Yeah, and it's a one-shot deal. Winner take all, as I've said many times. Yeah. You say, no one else's blood was big enough. Nope. You would have to be God, and his view of sin, there's a mighty price to be paid, but he willingly and knowingly knew what he was going to do. He told him he was going to do it. He did do it, and he looks at him. He said, I have all the authority in heaven and on earth. I pulled this off. You want it or not? So you reject him. There is no other way to have a relationship with God except through Jesus.
That's what I'm saying. Here you are working in a prison camp of sin, by your own choosing, by the way.
Yep.
And Jesus and the graveyard is at the prison. You will die there. Physically, and you're enslaved. So Jesus comes, enters the world, is a ransom for you to be freed from your sin, 100%. Because of the cross. Because you could work hard. You're not getting out of that. You're not getting out of that camp. There's nobody coming to pay you're stuck. And that's what Jesus did on a cross. And then the graveyard no longer, once you leave there, there's no graveyard where you're headed. That's why he got to that. What did he call it? An eternal inheritance. That means where the Lord moved you, once he moved you from that camp into the kingdom, there's no graveyard in his kingdom.
But Jase, something interesting I just thought of? Let's take our last break. Is that the picture you described about the ransom was the same one that the Hebrew writer used in Abraham dealing with Melchizedek? Because you remember the backdrop of that story, Lot was taken captive in the war that was going on. And so Abraham goes in to rescue Lot and offers the tithes to Melchizedek that would provide him coming out of captivity. So that whole scenario of we've been talking about Melchizedek totally links into what you just said. It was a shadow or one of those, copies we talked about
with the ransom.
What was going to happen with Jesus. Yeah, paying the ransom.
I didn't make that connection.
I hadn't thought about that till you just said that.
Yeah, what a connection that is. I wonder where the nuts and bolts of that story is. Where's that at?
That's Genesis 14. Yeah.
Okay.
You can read Genesis actually 13 and 14 to get the whole context of the war and how he was taken captive. Pretty interesting.
Oh, it really is. What was your point going to be about the Valley of Dry Bones, and where's that?
Well, that's Ezekiel 37 is where it is. But I was just reading it while y'all were talking, and it is kind of interesting what happens here. This is Ezekiel, and so he gets
what
this kind of. Ezekiel 37.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard this sermon preached a lot of times because it's very inspiring, like, what God can do. So I've heard a lot of, fiery preachers.
And this is the origin of the song Rattle by Elevation.
Yeah, exactly.
If some of you who listen to worship music, it's probably the most out there worship song ever invented, but I love it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It says in verse 1, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. So he's having this vision of what God wants him to see. And the valley was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry.
Skeletons, as it were.
Yes. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, O sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh upon you and cover you with skin. I will breathe in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise. And this is when you can really get into preaching, a rattling sound. And the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. And then he, goes on to describe more. But I mean, that's a rousing picture of what God can do with the skeleton, don't you think, Jase? I mean, that's a pretty good little illustration of kind of what you were talking about.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, I was looking up skull and crossbones, but because you know how they put like on a warning sign or whatever, or a hat, they put the skull and crossbones like this can kill you. I mean, what's interesting about this is that we actually will get a new body. So when I say no skeletons, it's no decaying skeleton. But when Jesus was resurrected and Thomas had trouble wrapping his head around that, even with all his friends said, no, he's back. So, and then even when he's looking at him, he's like, I'm going to need to put my hand on his scars. Or I'm going to need to see that. And so Jesus said, look at my hands and my feet. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have. So there's a way.
He didn't say flesh and blood. He said flesh and bone.
Yeah, flesh and bone.
Which I thought was interesting.
Well, right. So evidently this new imperishable body can be a body that you can look at, but it's not a skeleton that is, as you see a dying, what we all turn into after death, unless you were cremated, I guess.
Yeah, and I think my theory has always been, and I could be wrong, but that we won't need blood in the next realm in eternal life. I think blood is linked to here.
Well, see, Phil, your problem is going to be corrected about having too much blood. That's one bonus from living forever.
Just take it all.
Yeah.
Which is what I think Paul meant when he said that in 1 Corinthians 15, that a lot of people have misinterpreted, in my opinion, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of heaven. What he means is the current way we are, without the glorification that Jesus will bring to our resurrected bodies, we won't experience that. So I think Jesus is that. I don't think he just said that flippantly about flesh and bone. You see, I have. I think blood is linked to this realm because let's face it, Dad, you talked about it. I mean, literally your life depends on the blood.
That's correct.
It's coursing through your body physically.
I think that's why he's getting rid of it. There's no more. It's not needed anymore.
That's what I think. I think the same thing.
It just
I think in a glorified
was the price
realm,
paid. The price,
right?
and it was high.
And Jesus had shed his blood.
Yep.
For us.
Well, it was the highest. It was. Yeah. It was. You realize what separates Jesus from all other religions? When you go to any other religious organization, they give you what? Instruction, information. But what God did in Jesus, he gave you a story. It was like you have the information, you have a Bible, but within it, it tells a story of a person actually doing something. It's like, I guess my point would be like, if we're walking, down here where the bridge is, so we're walking down the bridge, the bridge that we made famous because on our little duck show we caught some crappie off of it. So now everybody that drives by, you know, they fish. But it's a pretty good distance. I mean, I'm not sure if you jumped off of it, it would kill you, but
it wouldn't kill you.
Okay, but close. It could. But so my point is, because it's the highest bridge I know around here, so I was going to make an example. So if me and you were walking down the bridge, and I said, Phil, I love you, and I'm gonna prove it to you, and I jumped off the bridge. Well, you'd be like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen somebody do. He went crazy. He lost his mind. So if I was trying to prove to you, you know, my love by jumping off a bridge, that's I'm stupid. But if you were drowning, if I came by and I saw you drown, and I jumped off the bridge and tried to save you, well, all of a sudden it's a totally different. It's a totally different story, is what I'm saying. It's not like I'm trying to just give you some information and you know, and some proof out of context. And I think that's what separates what Jesus did, because when you read the Gospels and see his character and the decisions he made, the choices he made despite our flaws, then all of a sudden it becomes really powerful.
Yeah, it's good.
I like it.
We're out of time. We'll carry over and talk a little bit more about this in our bonus overtime section. You can get that by blazetv.com/unashamed if you want to follow us over and become a subscriber and check it out. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.